2007, a 17-year-old girl in Pennsylvania built a fake web page that made fun of her assistant principal. It was a prank. She expected at worst detention. A judge sent her away for 3 months. The hearing lasted about 90 seconds, and no one in that room told her she was allowed a lawyer. The rest she would not learn for years, that the judge who signed her order was being paid by the jail that took her in, paid for every child he sent through its doors. Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, coal country, long after the coal. In the city of Wilkes-Barre stood a courthouse that was supposed to be the one place a kid who went wrong could be set right. The children who passed through it had done small things. A shoving match in a hallway, $20 of stolen makeup, a rude page online, the kind of thing that, almost anywhere else, ends with a warning and a ride home. Here it began with a signature. A child was handed a form giving up the right to a lawyer, and it was handed over the way you'd pass someone a receipt, as if it were nothing. No one explained what it meant, and so the children, young and scared and taught to trust the adults in the room, signed away the one protection that might have saved them. Then came a man in a robe named Mark Ciavarella. Half of the children who signed that form left his courtroom in handcuffs, bound for a locked facility. In the rest of the state, that number was 8 in 100, and placement was not a slap on the wrist. It meant being taken that same day, cuffed, photographed, driven hours from home, and left to sleep behind a locked door for weeks or months. Missing school, missing a parent's face, learning to think of yourself as an inmate before you were old enough to drive. It was fast, too. A minute, 2. A boy could be named a delinquent and let out a side door before his mother rose from her seat. Some parents drove home and only understood hours later that they would not be tucking their child in that night, or for many nights after. There were no long deliberations, no weighing of the evidence. There was a decision that seemed to have been made before anyone walked in. And still the parents believed it was justice, because who doesn't believe a judge? That belief, that a courtroom is a safe place to bring your child, was the first thing being sold. To see what was really happening, follow the money. It starts 1 floor up. There were 2 judges, Ciavarella in the juvenile court, and Michael Conahan, the president judge, the one who held the county's checkbook. The county ran its own juvenile detention center, paid for with tax dollars. Conahan starved it of funding and moved it toward the door. He went further. He put his name to an agreement that guaranteed a steady stream of children to a brand new, private, for-profit jail. A guarantee, in writing, that a certain number of kids would be needed. A for-profit jail lives by one number. Empty beds cost money, full beds make it. And now someone had promised the beds would be full. They were filled the only way they could be, 1 child at a time, by the judge down the hall. A developer named Robert Miracle built those facilities. An attorney named Robert Powell owned and ran them. Across roughly 3 years, the 2 men passed about $2.8 million to the judges. It didn't move in open daylight. It moved through side accounts and quiet transfers, dressed up as a finder's fee, a referral. Money, they said, for helping the places get built and kept busy. Take the language away, and it is very simple. A child walked in, a judge sent that child to a cell, a payment followed, and the children who came without a lawyer? In that courtroom, they appeared 7 to 11 times more often than anywhere else in the state, because a child with no lawyer is a child who cannot fight back. Every hearing that felt too quick was not impatience on the bench. It was inventory, and it did not happen once. It happened morning after morning for years, until the children who had been fed into those private beds numbered in the thousands. No one pulled the alarm because on paper, each of those hearings looked perfectly legal. A judge, a courtroom, a signature. The machine hid inside the shape of ordinary justice. A number this size goes silent, so stand in one house. Ed Kenzakowski was 17, a wrestler with a father who had a future picked out for him. He came before Ciavarella on a small charge, and he was sent away. The boy who came home was not the boy who left. He carried it for years. The record, the lost time, the verdict passed on him at 17 that he could never quite outrun. He struggled. He tried to hold a life together and couldn't. At 23, he took his own life. His mother is Sandy Fonzo. And when Ciavarella walked down the steps of a federal courthouse years later, A defendant now, out on bail, calm in a dark suit. She was there. She met him on the pavement in front of the cameras, grief turned to fury, and demanded to know how the man who had broken her son could stand there and say he'd done nothing wrong. He fixed his tie and looked past her. He had nothing. There is nothing to say. Now set that against the size of it. Thousands of children told at 13, at 15, that they were criminals, and being children, believing it. Some came out and never found their footing, a record that trailed them onto every job form and every college application, quietly closing doors they never saw close. Years later, grown now, some of them would sit in front of cameras and try to explain what it does to a person to be sold at 15. Some still can't. That is the part no ruling returns and no settlement buys back. For years it held, because of who was doing the complaining, a kid with a record, a parent who should have raised them better, easy voices to wave off, and they were waved off again and again. Then one more mother picked up the phone and called a small nonprofit in Philadelphia, the Juvenile Law Center. Its lawyers pulled the files expecting a few heavy-handed sentences. They found a machine. Hundreds of children, the same pattern each time. Minutes in the room, no lawyer, straight to the same private beds. At the same time, federal investigators were quietly building their own case, following the money the judges thought no one could see. And it might all have stayed buried. A local story, a few angry parents easy to ignore. If the families had not refused to go quiet, and if later a documentary had not put their faces on a screen and made the rest of the country finally look. For the first time, the children in those files stopped being case numbers. They were somebody's kid. They had names. The Juvenile Law Center took it to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and the court did a rare thing. It reached back into Ciavarella's courtroom and unmade it, throwing out thousands of adjudications, clearing the records of as many as several thousand children. The state, in plain terms, admitting that none of it should ever have counted. But a cleared record is not a returned childhood. Behind each of those cases was a year, or 2, or 3 that the county had already spent. Nights in a cell that no order could give back. The paperwork could be erased, the time could not. Then the law turned on the men who had sold it. Michael Conahan pleaded guilty to racketeering, 17.5 years. Ciavarella refused to fold. He insisted the money was a legal finder's fee, not a bribe, that he had never sentenced a child for cash. A jury heard him out and convicted him anyway on racketeering and corruption, and he was given 28 years. Later, a court ordered the two of them to pay more than $200 million to the families they had harmed. It was at last a kind of justice, and it forced a change. Pennsylvania moved to make sure a child standing in a courtroom actually has a lawyer at their side. But ask Sandy Fonzo if it was enough. We like to believe a courtroom is the one room where the money stays outside the door, that the people with power are held to a higher line than the rest of us. For thousands of children in one American county, that line had a price. It worked out to a few $1,000s a head. The judges are named and gone. One spent years in prison. The other quietly was granted an early release and walked back out into the world while the children he sentenced were still carrying theirs. Because that is the last, hardest truth of this story. The men could be punished, and still the years don't come back. If this is a story that should be seen and not buried, subscribe. The next one opens the way this one did. An ordinary person and a system that was never meant to reach them. Because the distance between a family like yours and a family like theirs is far shorter than we let ourselves believe.